Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, is that an echo?
Hi, Gary.
Hi, how are you? I think I'm too loud, am I not?
Hello.
How's everybody?
Hello. Doing okay.
John, did you get out for a walk today?
No, haven't left the chair very much.
Tomorrow.
Hope so.
Let's see.
Hi, Jan.
Hi, hi,
Good evening, Jan.
hi, Jen.
Hi. Greetings.
I'm trying to start my video. Mhm. I think it's coming in. Phone.
So is Gary's one part and John and Bill's the other part? Or are they coalesced? I mean,
They're two alternative versions,
oh, wow. Okay.
not two parts of the same one.
Very good. Thank you.
A briefer version, a more detailed version, and a less detailed version.
Ah, very good. Who's the less detailed, Gary?
Pardon me?
Is Gary's the less detailed?
He's a man of few words.
Ah.
You have to listen to him. They're worth listening.
Very good.
I thought I signed in.
Alvarez, you're in.
I am in. Okay. I'm trying to
Yeah.
turn my video on and not having much success.
Good evening, Walter.
Good evening, John. Good evening, all.
Hi, Walter.
Hi, Jan.
I'm in.
Yeah, and Alvarez, you should have a mute and a start video button somewhere.
Right, I do. I'm trying to get back to my name. And I have hit the unmute. I'm looking for my name to hit. Thought I hit-
Alvarez, I would suggest the old faithful routine is to
I'm
log
out.
out and log back in.
I think you're right. I'm going to give it a try. Okay.
Yeah, and if that doesn't work, turn it off and turn it back on.
True.
Turn it off and go to the movies. I
Hi,
didn't say.
Walter. Hi, Jose. It's Lynn. I'm here.
Hello.
Sorry, I'm a few minutes late.
Hey,
No
Tammy.
problem.
Lynn.
Just getting started.
Hi, Lynn.
Hi, John.
How you doing, Lynn?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing well. Hanging in there.
It's
Wonderful.
like I woke up, got out of bed. It's a good day.
I tell you, with the
let's-
weather changing, it just feels better to me. You know, warmer, nicer. Sunnier.
Caught in the in shower of the thunderstorm as it occurs.
Yes.
Well, I have to tell you all, being on the golf course, there was a high school golf tournament today, and it was wonderful seeing all of these young kids out playing. It was just fabulous. I think they were from Chantilly or Centerville, but I mean, it was just wonderful. And they can hit the ball. Holy moly.
All right, let's go ahead. Let's go ahead and get started. Jose, can you put the agenda up? Can you get a chance? There we go. All right. Okay, so let's go. Welcome, everybody, to this meeting, the April 12th, 2021 meeting of the Reston Comprehensive Plan Task Force. So we have several things on the agenda tonight. And as you can see, we've got updates. We've got much of this evening is going to be a working session on transportation and the subgroup work that will be discussed, presented, and discussed. And then we also have working session on parks and open space, an updated version of that document. And then we are carrying forward from the last meeting. We didn't get into the discussion of economic diversity and the long-term viability of larger blocks. So we do have a lot. Now, I have to say, we've been ending these meetings at 9, and tonight we actually got a request to go ahead until 9:30. So if we don't need it, we won't take it, but everybody, if everyone could be ready to go until 9:30 tonight. And, with that, breaks are okay. If anybody needs to take a break and turn off your video, that's just fine. But anyway, we'll go ahead and get started then. Let's go ahead. The first update we have is on equity and public health. And boy, we told Alvarez to log out and log back in. Alvarez, are you back with us? We have an update from that
He looks like he's
subgroup.
back in. I think he's just muted.
Okay.
Trying to click on everything. I can't even find the name at this point.
You're in there. We can hear you.
Okay, well, that's good. Okay, you can hear me. And I'll try to fix the other part later. Okay. All right.
Alvarez, go ahead and give us an update
Sure.
of that wonderful equity and public health subgroup that you're a part of.
All right. Okay. So we had our second meeting, and in a very few minutes, I want to try to give you a sense of the meeting. So I believe it's clear to the members that one of the first tasks we have is really try to define equity and then health. And we've had a lot of help from Jose, provided us a lot of information. And the county staff on equity is also going to help us a lot. But it's my feeling, and I think the rest of the members share a feeling that we have a sense of what we mean by equity, because it ended up many of us told our stories of what brought us to Reston, why we're here, why we stay here. It really is a sense of community and equity. We're proud to have, I think, all of us expressed a pride in having subsidized housing according to Bob Simon's original plan in all of the villages. And I think we really care about raising everybody up to their full potential. So we have a sense of it. The other thing I think that we really, an example of maybe how to do it, Supervisor Alcorn shared a story of another supervisor in the district, and I may not get all the facts straight, but the essence I hope you can understand. In that district, I think along the Route 1 corridor, they've not had, I think, what was called a Class A building built there in 30 years. And that supervisor, and I think it's a good thing for him to want to build a building there, but he believes that if low-income children sees the building there, which they don't see now, they may have aspirations of working in that building. And I think our discussion, we thought about it and said, Reston has had subsidized housing from the beginning. From the very beginning, Reston has had the type of buildings and multiple ones since that he's talking about, but we still have subsidized housing and inequities. So it's not just putting the building there, it's what we do about it. How do we connect the heads of those buildings, the people in those buildings that are really fortunate to live the true American dream in every way, how we can connect the needs of other people with them, to let them know about it, the members of the chamber, others. How can we make those connections and bring about the equity that we want? And I think many of us, in sharing their personal stories about really appreciating and supporting the shelter, helping those who actually live in the forest to help them to have the best life that they can and to help them better. Those are the sense of equities I think we want to have addressed in the plan. How to do it is something that we're going to work very hard on. But I think it's that sense of community that Bob Simon established on the 7 principles so long ago that has brought us here and why we're staying here. And that's what we're working on. And I think we had an incredible meeting about talking about the specifics of it. And we'll be sharing those with you as we continue. If anybody else that was on that panel wanted to add anything, but what I took away was a real combined sense of we want to describe, we want to put in the plan. And it was suggested by one of our members that we try to put it in every section that we can, that we're striving for equity. We're striving for the health of everyone. And there was talk about maybe having the builders that are building things, those condominiums in the transit TSA area, that they put in equity or require them to spend something on equity, if they're paying a fair wage, that they're providing for the health of their people. And also perhaps to include, if they can, subsidize housing in some of the buildings that they're building, things of that nature. Does anyone want to add anything? But I think those are the highlights that I took away, the spirit of equity, to really capture it in the plan and throughout the plan. Does anyone?
Yeah. Hi, Alvarez. It's Lynn. How are you?
Wonderful. How are you, Lynn?
Good. Yeah. I have to say, as task force subgroups go, this subgroup was the most high energy, positive. It was really, I thought it was one of the better engaging subgroups, and just a lot of high energy. And I think it was, I don't know if Reston Bell is on, but Reston came up with, I thought, a great idea, and that was to really start to think about creating programs that will engage local communities that are disadvantaged to take on internships with developers,
Right.
or have those types of equity programs in place. And I thought that was a fantastic idea. And as Alvarez mentioned, we did have a discussion about the increasing incidence of homelessness in this area, whether it's COVID related or non. But yeah, it was a great meeting. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Lynn. Thank you, Alvarez. Does anyone else from that group want to add anything else? I'll just make this one observation. This is really funny, but I think we've got maybe, I think there were 4 subgroup members that participated in this. And through the course of this meeting, they all discovered they had New Orleans connections.
That's right.
So I don't know. That was not set up that way.
No, it wasn't. I'm
like,
planning a crawfish boil somehow.
That's true.
So anyway, well, listen, that group is still going. Keep going, Len. Keep going, Alvarez. Very good discussions there, and just for context, one of the things that some of the outputs of that subgroup could fit. We've talked about maybe looking at criteria or even the Reston planning principles as being criteria for developers to get to higher density in the comprehensive plan. So here we're actually having the discussion that could at some point be tied to development reviews. So anyway, that's the context back to the comprehensive plan. And I do want to thank the subgroup for doing this. And this is much of it is new for Fairfax County in terms of putting this into a land use context. So anyway, good stuff. Any questions for or comments on the equity and public health subgroup?
Walter, this is David Vanel. I've got a question. The Let me get my other ear in there. Thank you. The health department's, county health department's satellite office here in Reston does a truly remarkable job with health, with mental health issues, homelessness. They're there serving the public, whoever walks in the door. And I'm wondering if it would be you and your colleagues on the Board of Supervisors who could see their way clear to putting more staff and more money into that.
Wow, that's a great question. We certainly have staffed up a number of public health department, and also community service board things during the pandemic. We have ramped up several of them have been diverted, frankly, to focus on pandemic related issues. But David, I appreciate that comment. I'm all for it. We, particularly with mental health issues right now, I think everybody is pretty aware, and this is a lot of it related to the pandemic. We're seeing a really dramatic increase in the need for mental health services in our community, and not everybody in our community can afford, the private providers that are out there, and even with those. And I was just having this conversation last week with a couple of folks with the Community Services Board. Even in the private sector, the private providers, they're long waiting lists to get in. So we do, that is an area that we definitely need to do more. So noted, David. And it is budget time. So your comments are good time, well timed.
Thank you very much.
Other comments, questions for equity and public health? All right, then let's move on next to the population.
I do have a question, Mark. Now,
Oh, yes,
excuse me.
Mark. Hey, Mark. Yes.
Yeah. With that, for Alvarez and talking about everything, I never heard any linkage. You linked to the principles of Reston in one of the comments.
Mhm.
However, with the One Fairfax policy, there are 17 areas of focus. What I didn't hear is any cross linkage between the One Fairfax policy and the work being done here. Normally, I'm from a policy background, and I look at how to make sure that we have the linkages across different policy type documents. And has any thought been done to that with the subgroup that's working this? To the One Fairfax policy and its 17 areas of focus, any linkage to what's being written here of how to cross-link it, as Jennifer Judge said in her comment, of how to cross-link it across what we're writing in these areas.
Mark, I'll just jump in. I think that's definitely something that the subgroup can look at. There was a brief briefing from county staff on One Fairfax, but I think maybe condensing that down or pulling out the important pieces of that, and then the ones that have some relevance in a land use context is probably the next step.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think
is that right?
Yeah, I just think that's a great question. Is we intend to look at One Fairfax and see how we can do that, because it's I think it has a lot of wonderful stuff in it, and we are going to look at it, and along with the other material that Jose has given us. Places like Seattle has got a big head start on us, and try to look at it all. But great question.
So there is a question in the chat from Jennifer, and then I believe Burton said he had the same question. What's the plan for putting pen to paper for the equity pieces in the other chapters, and also for delivering some text on the public health chapter? Actually, Michelle, I don't think Michelle is on the call tonight, but Michelle actually flagged that exact issue.
Yeah.
Alvarez, do you want to talk to that a little bit?
Oh, yeah, she did. And there was a lot of discussion about how to actually put as much as we can in every part of the plan to incorporate that ideas of just equity and health wherever we can. And look for your help and the people that are dealing with other parts of the plan on how to do it.
Yeah, thank you, Alvarez. And I think just as a very quick summary, much of the discussion was about, the fact that we do have communities, we do have places in Reston where people have not really directly accessed the growth and the economic activity that we've seen in the Dulles corridor. For whatever reason, these many folks in these communities have been at the margins, and much of what's being discussed is how to build those bridges, how to basically connect those communities, people in those communities, with the tremendous economic activity that's come to Reston, so that's an area I think the equity and public health subgroup are on the right track for putting forward some interesting ideas for the task force to consider. Any other questions on that or comments? Okay, then let's move on for I believe a little briefer update from John Carter. John, do you want to give us an update on next steps on the population topic area?
Sure. On the population, mostly built around housing units for now and the commercial square foot. We are beginning or pretty much understand the maximum allowed in the last plan. So now we're ready to get started on the land use and design chapters. And we're going to build those from the ground up. So the total number will be just the result of all of our going through the various areas of Reston. And if you remember from before, there's 6 or 7 areas. We're going to start with the convenience centers and the village centers and just talk about what is the level of development in those areas to start with. And then we will move all the way through various areas of Reston. And the final population numbers will be the result of building from the ground up, not from the top down. We're not going to select a number and then try to meet it. We're going to build it from the ground up. And as we go, we're going to try to identify what is necessary to earn your way to whatever density maximums we come up with. There's this notion of you don't get that automatically. You need to earn your way to that. And starting, again, what was said earlier is starting from the planning principles as kind of the screen for each one. And that's our plan. Either in 2 weeks or 4 weeks, I guess, we will start and discuss the level of development at the convenience centers and village centers. So that's pretty much the update and what we're beginning to do.
John, thank you very much. Any questions for John? Okay, John, appreciate you're wearing a lot of hats and doing a lot of work on this. So thank you for that and several other things that we'll probably be talking about tonight at different times. So thank you, John. All right, let's go. Next is energy and environment. Is that Tammy, or do you have an update for us on that?
Yes, I do. Bill Penniman and I have been noodling this. As you are aware, the current plan has environment sprinkled throughout a bunch of pages, and we are going to be condensing our comments into one organized chapter, aspirationally organized. We are very fortunate in Reston to have the Reston Association Environmental Action Committee, which is chock full of people who have dedicated their lives to being environmentally educated, and they have offered their help. At the beginning of the process, this task force collectively went through the chapters and subject matter and picked out some things that the body of people here wanted to include. And I would love to know if anybody else is interested in working on this chapter, because I need some people to do some research to assure that we cover those particular subject matters. Please don't ask me what they were. I have them written and they are in the, I think, June documents where we had the charts with the chapters and questions. But anyway, would love some help with that. But I look forward to working on this with Bill. He's been busy with transportation, so we're just starting. But we have a good start. Bill and the EAC committee have both gone through what exists in the plan, and they've analyzed and changed and asked extra questions. So I think it's a good start. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tammy. Any questions for Tammy? And I would say any volunteers, but I would, if those of you with an interest in that, I would strongly encourage you to reach out to Tammy and offer assistance. So Tammy, let us know, let Jose know
Sure.
how that's going, and we're happy to put out a broader request if need be.
Thank you.
I
Tammy?
do have it's not a question, but I've got a little bit of a response that might be helpful in terms of the research. Montgomery County is going through their general plan update, which they do once every 65 years. And so they're starting with, what is a plan? What is a plan for the 21st century? And many of these topics that we're covering here, the equity and health, obviously population, energy and environment, particularly along with sustainability, are high on their list of things. And so I would urge us to maybe look at I think the comp plan, the general plan for Montgomery County is written from a staff perspective, and the chairman of the planning commission is putting out these discussions once a week about it. So if you get a chance, look at those. It is pretty forward thinking, and they're trying to break some new ground and doing some interesting different things. And we are in sync with that, I would say, with the chapters that we have. So anyway, for those who want some more reading material, that would be a good one. Lots of graphics, lots of information on it.
And is this publicly available, John?
Yes, yes. Just go to the
Thank
Montgomery
you.
County Planning Department.
Thank you.
Tammy?
Great, thank you, John. I see Myra has her hand up. Myra?
Oh, yeah. Tammy, did you address, I haven't seen your draft or what you guys have done. Did you guys
No,
address
we
the
have no
noise?
draft. Pardon me?
There's language in the comp plan, which always concerned me. It's about building next to the toll road. And it's about DBA, and it said, even though staff advises against it, they're going to still, allow certain structures to be built, blah, blah. Are you guys addressing that section?
I'm sure we will. But we have, just to be really clear, we've been doing preliminary research and going through what's in the plan now. We are in no means anywhere near completion of writing this chapter. We are just starting the process.
Okay, great.
Thank
Well,
you.
I'll send you that back and forth I had before that went through the planning commission, because that was
Thank
quite
you.
concerning.
Okay.
So Walter, this is Mark. If I could jump in
Hey, Mark.
on that topic, because I've got a little bit of the history on it. Long story short is that the comprehensive plan and the zoning ordinance both historically have prohibited residential development within 200 feet of any interstate highway and, by extension, the toll road. And the reason was for noise impacts in those areas. Obviously, when you drive a $6.5 billion rail line through the middle of the toll road, and want to put TOD development around the stations, you necessarily end up with residential development within 200 feet of the toll road right of way. And the 2014 comprehensive plan contemplated eliminating that prohibition, provided that you dealt with the noise mitigation impacts on the interiors of residential units that were within that 200 feet. In between the task force's report and the Board of Supervisors adoption, somehow that language got dropped. And so the staff did a corrective amendment a number of years later when it was pointed out to them that that section got dropped. And so it was not necessarily a standalone amendment, but it was in fact a corrective amendment to deal with the fact that it somehow got dropped. And it's not been widely used among the development that's been approved to date. But as folks who have participated in the P&Z committee, there's a lot of conversation about how you mitigate noise from the toll road. Some projects have proposed noise walls, which have not gone over well. Some folks have proposed parking garages that front the toll road that also have not gone over well. And the reality is, if you're going to put residential at these transit station areas, some of them necessarily are going to have to be within 200 feet of the toll road right of way. And so that's the issue that that plan amendment is trying to tackle, and the reason that it was done as a standalone amendment.
Supervisor Alcorn, this is Barbara Byron. May I add something
Barbara,
as
yes.
well? Hi. So the other thing about it is that that's very old language, even though that amendment may have been late. The policy is very old, and the policy was put into place way before modern construction techniques. And so what we found is that now the noise that previously could not be mitigated to make a healthful environment inside of an apartment or a house now can easily be done and by basically standard construction techniques. So it's something that's on our plate to address at some point in time, but it furthers the discussion that Mark had about why it is still, could still very well be appropriate to have residential closer than the 200 feet, particularly if you do the appropriate noise mitigation through your construction.
I agree with that. I did work with an acoustical engineer when I looked at that. And his concern was, are you going to have apartments with balconies? Because then that would be an issue.
Yep, Mara, very familiar with these discussions. Yeah, this goes back, I think the late 80s. Remember, it goes back at least that far and probably earlier. So,
Well, we can
so
look at
that's
it
good.
later.
Yeah. So Tammy, I think that's one of the things that you'll have the pen for now. Any other questions for Tammy on energy and environment? Okay.
Walter, this is David Vanell again.
David.
Tammy, it might be helpful if you could dig out that information that you wrote up in June, and also kind of turn it into a document, including the areas that you are interested in to have people do research on, and pass it around to the listserv.
Will do. Thanks, David.
All right, thank you. Okay, anything else on energy and environment? All right, then let's dive into transportation. John Mooney. John, I'm going to turn it over to you and let you lead us through the transportation section. And I'll just say I will probably start seeing where we are about an hour from now, or maybe a little bit longer. We do have some other items in the agenda, but let's see how we can do for the next hour or so. John, take it away.
Thank you, Walter. And I'm going to hold the baton only for a short time before passing it on to John Carter, who will do the first and longer part. So our goal is at the end of the evening to have actually given conceptual approval, task force's conceptual approval to the parts that John is going to present. Okay? So he's presenting all of the chapter except for the transportation management section. Okay? So John's going to lead the discussion on that part. And we hope to get conceptual approval with some suggested tweaks on that part. The second part will be a discussion, some presentations by Gary Maupin, Bill Penniman, and myself on the transportation management section. That we do not hope to complete tonight because we actually have two alternative versions that we present for people to look at. What we want to get there are feedbacks on the level of explanation they would like in that second part on transportation management, and any of the important items they see which they either like, dislike, or would like to make suggestions to. And our goal in all this is to have a final document ready to be approved by the task force at its April 26th meeting. So that's the overview, and I hand the baton over to John Carter.
I didn't realize you were going to do that, but I guess I'll be okay.
I'm sorry, John. I thought I didn't mean to surprise you. I thought.
John, I think that you were going to do that PowerPoint slide deck, remember?
Yeah,
and
I
have it. I have it if you want. If Jose, if you want to give me sharing privileges, I can.
Well, John may have a different idea.
No, that's fine. I was just going to ask you whether you think it would be better to do the PowerPoint or the text. Should we start with the PowerPoint?
Yeah, that's what we thought we were going to do.
Okay, I can do that.
Okay.
I think. The last time I did this, I was working with this, what was called the Montgomery County Ombudsman. And we were putting in Montrose Parkway, which was tremendously controversial. And this lawyer asked me to come to this meeting in an elementary school. And he said, hey, you know, John, it'll be no problem. There'll just be a couple of people there. And, you know, just tell them a little bit about it. And I go there and there's no parking places. The place is packed. And I go, well, this must be some other meeting. I'm sure our meeting is somewhere else. No, I go into the cafeteria and it's packed. There must have been 300 people there. And this lawyer, this ombudsman, he starts out and he goes, well, I'm here to talk about this Montrose Parkway. And I know it's controversial, but John Carter's here to talk about it. I escaped with my life, but barely, I think. So we'll give this a try. So chapter 1, are you going to run this, Jose, or do I run it? Next slide, Jose.
Jennifer's running it, yeah.
I'm running it. Just tell me next slide. I'll go to the next slide for you.
Okay. So here's the way it's organized. So we have the roadways and streets. It uses the county classification system, expressways, minor arterials, A and B, collector streets, and local streets, then bikeways, and then trails and sidewalks. So that's the first part. The second part talks about the public transit that is proposed for Reston. The third part is the transportation management program, and that has 3 parts. It's the level of service and other things. Since we're going to talk about this later, I won't go into that. And then the last part is the placemaking. This is the design aspects of it. Pretty straightforward. We essentially started over from the comp plan because the comp plan today has different sections organized geographically. You have the TSAs, you have the PRC areas, which overlaps a little bit with the TSAs. It has village centers, the convenience centers. It leaves out some other things. What we've tried to do is combine it. Since many of the transportation facilities run throughout Reston through these various neighborhoods, We've combined it into one section. That helped us to eliminate a lot of detail, eliminate a lot of repetition that was in that plan that was necessary. And if you remember how that plan was constructed, the TSA areas, transit station areas were done first, approved about 2015, and then later the rest of Reston was approved in 2018. And it basically just took the two and linked them together. Now we can do it all together. The former plan also was more flexible with a lot of word pictures, and it didn't have too many specifics. So we've started out in the expressways and principal arterials right here. And here's a table. We've used tables a lot. Some of this you've already heard in the presentation. So in the table is organized by the classification system. It has the classification, it has the street name, it has the limits of the street, the number of lanes, and then the comments. The comments are mostly what's proposed. So in the expressways, wasn't much to do. There was one intersection, I believe, with the Fairfax County Parkway and Sunrise Valley Drive. I think that was the only change. And then they wanted 6 lanes throughout on the expressway, which it pretty much already is. Now going down to the arterials, and some people have difficulty with me, and I'm sort of one of them actually, but I think the names are more important to me even than the classification. So the next one is Reston Parkway, South Lakes Drive to the Dulles Toll Road. So this is a widening to 6 lanes for that portion. It's already 6 lanes as it goes over the bridge, and then it would narrow down to 4 lanes as it approaches South Lakes Drive. And this is the linear park that some people have talked about along that, and it has a combined sidewalk and bikeway on both sides, including the existing bridge over the Dulles Toll Road. That will be probably a penny or two to achieve that, but that's a long-term goal. Next one down is Barron Cameron, Route 7 to the Fairfax County Parkway. There really is nothing new to that. Maybe some trees in the median. You know that has that wildlife meadow and a lot of it. Now down to the ones that sort of hit us a little bit closer. Minor arterial type B, they call it. So this is Wheelie Avenue, Sunrise Valley Drive to Sunset Hills Road. This would be, and I know other people are working on how to get a bridge or a tunnel or crosswalk, how to get across Wheelie Avenue. And we might be able to reduce the width by maybe reducing the lane widths a little bit, possibly eliminating lanes if traffic decides to wend its way up to the other parts of the Silver Line station. Bikeways on both sides. We have lots of approvals, but they could be coordinated a little bit better across those than they are today. And we want to figure out how to get across the Dulles Toll Road, particularly pedestrians and bikes. Next is Sunset Hills. So that would be expanded down to Hunter Mill Road from basically where it crosses Wheelie Avenue, probably near where the post office is. It goes to 4 lanes. There has already been a comp plan amendment for just this piece that moves the Sunset Hills over slightly to improve the connection to Hunter Mill. Sunrise Valley Drive, this was another one of those linear parks. Let's see, bikeway and a separate sidewalk on the north side of that. And we want to work on doing that better as we do that. The Campus Commons has a pretty good design, mostly as a result. It was such a controversial project. There was a lot of pressure on the developers to do a good job on that. And I think they have done a pretty good job on that piece. And hopefully when Comstock comes in, we'll be able to do something there, and maybe Association Drive. Let's see. Monroe Street, West Ox Road to town of Herndon. It's a
Yeah,
little
we got rid expansion. of Monroe Street, just FYI, in the
We
very
did,
last
last
iteration, we
round.
got rid of that one, yeah.
Thank you. Fox Mill Road, a little bit of expansion. West Ox Road, a little bit of expansion. Then we get to the collector streets, and this is where the most headway will be made. These are mostly done by the private sector, except for the next three, which is well, wait a minute, the collector streets would be done by the county or the state. So you have Soapstone Overpass, Town Center Underpass, and South Lakes Drive Overpass, bridge or tunnel through the toll road. Pinecrest is a street. I think we have a graphic of that coming up. And then last but not least is the local streets. This was referred to in the past as the grid of streets. Those would be mostly by the private sector, mostly two, maybe some 4-lane roads. Many of these are probably the most important roads in Reston in terms of establishing character. So the next slide. So now we're getting to specifics. This is the Reston Parkway improvements. A nice stretch of the parkway in that lower right drawing or photograph with the building set back. They have highlights at the intersection and these pedestrian-oriented lights in between. Next slide. So this is the minor arterials. There is, that's Wheelie, or that's Sunrise Valley Drive. And that's what I'm talking about with the setback from the curb to the, in this case, the bikeway, room for trees, maybe 10-foot setback there. The bikeway by itself, a little separation, and then the sidewalk. Buildings are set back 50 feet from that curb. We're going to be challenged to be able to achieve that, but that's what the linear park was supposed to be in the last plan. We had lots of words in the last plan and some diagrams that were pretty loose. Now we have something a little more specific. So there's those other streets. I don't know that we need to go through these again, but okay, next one. So there's in that upper left, so hopefully our bridges could be more like that picture. This is, I think it's M Street in Washington, D.C. So they have fairly wide sidewalks. It's lit. They're combined bikeways and sidewalks. And then the middle upper picture is some of the setbacks that we might be able to get in some of this higher speed with the on-street parking, lots of trees, and the wide sidewalks. So these are the three major roads. There's that Pinecrest extension. I don't know if you can see that, but it's connecting from Sunrise Valley Drive down to South Lakes Drive. And the beginning of that has already been approved and planned. So this provides another connection in Reston. So next slide. So now here's the grid of streets. So this is the town center area. Working from the top of that drawing, you're going to see a larger park. And Supervisor Alcorn, I think you'll recognize that the larger park is in the middle. This is the change that would create the larger park. This would be maybe the future Robert Simon Memorial Park. But I think we have something like 5 acres in that area to work with. The dotted lines are either approved or planned. The solid lines are the ones that are actually built. So you can see the existing town center and the townhouses, the West Town Center area. All those streets are connected. That's quite a network that's been produced. Pretty well done streets, a lot of character to them. We are challenged to replicate that. We're working on that. The Boston Properties is just above where it says M for Metro. And that's the Boston Properties street grid. And then next to that is RTC West. And then on the other side of the toll road is the Wegmans project. And we probably could do a little bit more work on the adjacent project, which hasn't come in yet. Adjacent to the RTC West. Adjacent, you see the very fine grid on the one and not so much on the one next to it. So these are all private sector streets. As Mark Looney cautioned us, it's good to have this in a plan. It's not always done, but just in case they're going to be funded by the public sector, at least you have them there, and that's a requirement usually for public sector funding is to have the streets called out or labeled in some way in the comp plan. Next one is okay. So now this is Wheelie Station area. Can you point it out? Yes. So these are pretty much all done. We made some changes here. There were some streets that went close to that park, which is Lake Fairfax Park. That's that light green area. We took that off so it doesn't cross a stream. There's a lot of topography in there. So we revised that slightly. It still produces a pretty good grid system, a pretty good connection. And I know some people are interested in could we come up with a decent way to get to Lake Fairfax from this area? And perhaps these local streets would help to do that. Then you have the EYA area, which is south of the toll road, or not south of Sunset Hills. Can you point that out, Jennifer or Jose? So that's the grid system that's actually being built today. If you go over there, you can see them coming along. To the west of that is Comstock. And there is a connection through all those projects all the way over to Plaza America, which will be tricky. There's also a stream and a forest in area in that, and we've moved the street over slightly to miss the stream and the forested area. And then just above that is Isaac Newton Square. That's pretty much what has been proffered. And then, Lynn, we've missed the road from nowhere. That might have been on purpose. What do you think?
I think so. I hope so.
Yes. And then on the other side, you see it says local street to be determined. We need to work on that a little bit, but the idea is to develop a street that would extend from Wheelie Avenue all the way over to the existing streets that you see by the access road there. That's the Sheridan project. So a street that goes all the way through, and we'll be laying that out. And also it runs through the area called Association Drive, which is under the word local. And finally is the Herndon Monroe area. A little bit harder to come up with, but that's pretty much, most of those streets are in, many of them are built. You can see a dotted line there that connects the two sides of that. Yeah, right there. And then we still need to come up with a local grid street around the county-owned property, which is where the parking garage is. And there's that, the wetlands there. It's over to the right. If you could move your cursor over to the right where the little blue splotch is. Yeah, right there, right there. So there's a lot done there. That's CIA in there too, and we're kind of a little reticent about putting some grids on top of the CIA, although it might be fun, I guess. So the upper right is the little snippet of EYA, and Reston Station Boulevard is the one that runs through that. There are some of these streets that are more important than others. Reston Station Boulevard is one. There's one in Isaac Newton Square, Market Street, Library Street that connects north to south, and then some streets in the Wegmans property. So next. So that's the streets. Now, in terms of bikeways, there is a countywide bikeway system. And that's what the map is right there. And I think maybe some help from Burton, perhaps, if he's on the line. I think the countywide system is okay. I think we need some more detail in it. So WOD Trail, obviously, the Sunrise Valley Drive, the cycle track is important. Again, I mentioned Reston Station Boulevard. And here's those important streets: Market Street, Library Street, Inspiration Street, which is in Boston Properties, Isaac Newton Square. Those are the ones that probably could have some county dollars in. And I thought it was important to mention these specific ones. And then we have those are the on-street bike lanes. And then there's off-street. Reston Parkway has one, Wheelie Avenue has one, although they have a mixture of on and off-street. You have the 3 overpasses or underpasses, or Soapstone, Town Center Parkway, South Lakes Drive. And then important one is Old Reston Avenue. We're not going to widen that. And then some of the local streets. So we have a bikeway system. This is the table, and then there's text in the write-up for it. So next is the transit, I believe. Yes, so, I mean, obviously we know what Metro is doing. We're getting 3 stations, but what else are we getting? So I think the next slide has the local system. Yes, there will be a local bus system, the Fairfax County Connector. And this could be pretty good if we work at it a little bit more. We need some bus shelters, probably at least at the village centers, maybe other key areas. The map shows the routes of the various bus systems that would connect you to the metro station. This would be a great opportunity to link the whole community with mass transit. Possibility we could have even, instead of these diesel buses, possibly electric buses, maybe a little more fanciful in terms of the bus shelters themselves. And then some projects, the Wegmans is one example that has their own shuttle system. And I think the town center is going to have its own shuttle system. The Wegmans has a self-driving system, so that you get picked up at the metro station and they bring you to your office building within the complex. I'm not sure what Boston Properties has in mind, but it's a similar similar system. So you have the metro, you have the Fairfax County Connector, and then within certain projects you will have better connections. And maybe you can get a little more fanciful with these self-driving cars, or at least electrical vehicles. So that's the public transit system. That's pretty good for Reston, I would say. The streets need to be designed for that too. So here's the transportation management. I'm not going to get into this. It has 3 levels.
Yeah, we can let John Mooney do this piece.
It has the network level. It has the transportation level of service, it has transportation demand management, and then it has the intensity of the uses. That's how you can affect the use of the transportation system. And the intensity of uses, that's all about the densities, but it's also about the mix of uses. So let's go past this. So the next slide is the placemaking. We want to do better than we're doing in Reston. So when you come to Reston, the first thing you see if you go south is the Reston Heights. And I know what people are interested in is that linear park along there. We need some better language about that linear park, but we don't have a very good first impression there. We don't have sidewalks. We don't have bikeways. Even if we did, you wouldn't be able to get across the toll road. And so upper left is the way it looks now. Up on the right is the way it looks now, at least in front of the town center. So more attention there. The Harrison Park apartments, you know, that they've got those Y angles there to keep the cars off it, but no sidewalk and no good first impression along there. And then the last one is north of Barron Cameron. Pretty good. Probably could use some more trees in the median. And hopefully our environmental committee will perhaps talk about creating an urban forest in Reston. We do a good job outside the right of way. Inside the right of way, not quite as good. So the whole lighting, the planting of it, the functional aspects of bikeways and sidewalks, we need to work on that. And that's part of the placemaking. You can have lots of streets and you can have lots of transit, but if nobody wants to use it, if it isn't attractive to use, or if it doesn't connect properly, we're wasting lots of dollars, and there are big dollars in these things. So I don't know. We have got another slide, I think. Yes, these are among my favorites. So that's Wheelie Avenue on the upper left. Hopefully we can do much better than that. As I already said, we want to be able to get across the toll road. We want to have some trees in there. We want to have lights so it's safe to walk. That's Comstock. And then over here on the upper right, that's Wheelie Avenue in front of the JBG project. And over on the lower left is the Comstock along Wheelie as well. Not quite as bad there, but the sidewalk doesn't go anywhere. And then on the right is a Montgomery County example, of course. This has a combined bikeway and sidewalk along Western Avenue. And you see it's very photogenic. Not a lot of people in the picture, but I'll tell you, there's lots of people that use that connection to the metro station. So making it hospitable and making it possible for people to actually want to use these facilities is very important in the transportation plan and often forgotten. And we have a challenge here in Virginia because VDOT owns the public streets. And then we have a county transportation system too that's a little better. But we need to work on this. Let's see what else we have. Okay, this is another one of my favorites. This is on the upper left is the linear park along Sunrise Valley Drive. It's a wonderful place for the electrical transformers. It's the wonderful place for those highlights. By the way, those are the same lights used on the Beltway, which probably is not appropriate here. And then on the upper right is what Campus Commons is proposing along the same stretch. We need to work at that. And you could see there's probably a lot of people want to use the one on the right and not a lot of people on the one on the left, even if you could figure out which one is the bike path and which one is the sidewalk. Then on the lower left is a similar notion of a separated bike path from the pedestrian sidewalk. And then the one on the lower right is Wegmans and the start of trying to do the same thing as Campus Commons, although I believe here it's a combined sidewalk. But this, if you use that, you've got the two ponds there, you've got the buildings in set back, you've got trees along the sidewalk. Hopefully we can get streetlights in there that make it safe. If you travel in Reston, particularly around the transit stations, my favorite one is Town Center Parkway, the existing. It is dark as pitch at night, and that's all finished on both sides. And those people are expected to use the Town Center metro station significantly, but it's unsafe today, even for me, which doesn't bother me, but we need to do better in these areas. And I know it's unusual to hear all this stuff about placemaking in a transportation section, but I think it's worthy of ours doing that now. Let's see, do we have another slide? Maybe not. This is Sunrise. This is Sunset Hills. Now again, we've got electrical transformers. We've got a 4-foot wide sidewalk. we've got the signal box for the lights all in that area that should have been looking like the picture on the upper right. That's what it's supposed to look like. And so we've got just a tremendous challenge. This will probably be one of the most traveled sidewalks in Reston. And whether you need it or not, there's 4 feet there. And it's close to the curb. There's not a tree in sight. And then on the bottom sketch is the, this is what we're now calling the Reston Greenway. It's perhaps, and this needs words to explain it. And Jose is doing a great job with the students at Virginia Tech. They're taking on a sample design of what this could be. Examples of this, if any of you been to Boston and seen the emerald necklace that Frederick Law Olmsted did in the late 1800s, or the New York High Line, this has started a movement in this country of greenways. And there are 15 cities and towns across America that have joined forces and created a nonprofit. And what they do is exchange information on these greenways and how they're designed and what's good and what's not so good and the mistakes that they've made and the successes that they've had. And I think ours could be nominated, I think, to join that group as a greenway. And I'm getting off topic a little bit, but if you start from Old Reston Avenue to Wheelie, there's a description of perhaps 4 outdoor rooms that could be created. The first one would be the historic town of Wheelie that has the train station and the gazebo. It has the old town hall. It has a significant amount of green space around it. The next one would be the former area of Fannie Mae that has the 3 ponds. The Garden of Remembrance could possibly be located there. The next one, we know we have the electric company there has a big switching station, but that's an area that overlooks the golf course and perhaps an overlook. Perhaps we could turn this back to a natural Virginia landscape. And then the 4th room would be down there at Wheelie, where we have the soccer field. We probably need some parking in there, but that's all owned by Virginia Department of Transportation, and they have that surface parking. If you ever want to see during a flood, if you want to see cars float, you can see those down in that low spot there. But so that's some notions about the Greenway. And so you would include Sunset Hills, that you include these 4 rooms, and they would be connected by W&OD Trail and Sunset Hills. I think quite a magical thing that we could do there. Next. Okay, so again, this is Reston Station Boulevard on the upper left. We need to work on that. The promenade, the project across the street is coming back. We might have a chance to improve that. This is on the upper right is Boston Properties, the internal, and that street ends at the transit station. They have done quite a lot to, they don't show it, but the whole street lighting system, they've created these outdoor rooms. These are internal streets, private streets that they will build themselves, but very photogenic and a lot of retail that they're going to figure out what the best stores and the best places. And we already have some very nice streets in Reston, particularly in the town center. There's Market Street in the middle and also a side view. So you can see the trees and the lights and all the things that they do. And on the lower right is Boston Properties, the phase 1. It's hard to see, but those red dots are the street lights, and it's filled with street trees all the way around. So much more attention to placemaking that we can add. That will be our addition to the plan. Next. Okay, here's, I think this is the end of it. These are the transit stations. We already went through the grid of streets. So is there
All
any
right.
more slides? I think that's it.
John, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Let's, so this is, I think, a helpful overview. But John, are you going to go over the text, or at least walk through the text coming from the subgroup, or who was going to do
Yeah,
that?
I had planned to do that. So let's actually,
Okay.
I didn't plan to do anything, but
All right.
okay. So let's see. So there you
Great.
see the same title. You see, so we've started out with the principles, and maybe you all want to read this in more detail. This came from the group. I think John Mooney had a separate group that spent a lot of time crafting these, and then the subgroup helped to craft it a little bit more. And so I think we pretty much come to a consensus on these principles, right, John? He's hesitating.
Yes, no, I had to unmute myself.
Okay.
I'm sure there can be a few tweaks
Yeah.
here and there, but there is after quite a bit of discussion, there is consensus on these principles.
Yes, there's quite a bit of grappling over this and the words, and I think the subgroup worked pretty well together on this. It's all about the balance of sidewalks, bikeways, pedestrian ways, and roads, and so hopefully we've achieved the balance in there. So now the next,
John and Walter, could I? This is David Vanel.
yes, go ahead.
Jennifer and I had a conversation about the verbs being used in the principles section. I had originally suggested and written in that for each of these principles, we should use the word shall. And Jennifer advised me that, well, she thought that the county lawyers were not in favor of the word shall anywhere in their documentation now, and it strikes me that that's kind of odd anyway. But I changed it. Instead of saying connections between modes of travel shall be convenient, safe, and efficient, or similar things, I think I use shall in almost every one of them. I would like to float the idea of putting shall back into there and let the lawyers have at it when it kind of finally comes to the government center. I don't know how any of you or any of the task force members feel about that, but it seems to me that if we're stating principles, we ought to state them firmly and directly. It shouldn't be described as a wish list. This is a principle, or these are principles, and we should stick to them.
Yeah, David, thanks for flagging that.
Yeah.
Let's, I don't know, Barbara Byron, I don't know if you heard that. How are we on the shall versus should versus will versus are?
I vehemently opposed to that.
Hold on. Jan, hold on just a second. Jan, hold on just a second. Let me, Barbara Byron, let's get her take on that. She can tell us what the thinking is from staff on that.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. So our attorneys have looked at court cases, and the courts have found that while we might think that shall is an imperative, that the courts have ruled it's not. And so, for example, in the zoning ordinance, when we want to have an imperative, we've used the word will or must instead of shall.
Yeah.
So that could be the case here. But having said that, there's a difference between the zoning ordinance and the plan, and one is a requirement and one is a guide. And so we typically use the word should in the plan. But if you do want to make it stronger, we suggest that you change it to will or must.
Okay. David, does that make sense, David?
Yeah, it does. And in fact, I wrote it in that fashion. There's a couple of places where I use is. There's a couple of places where I just use the verb, and a couple of places where I use um, uh, no, anyway, yeah, I can buy off on that. I think that as long as what we're doing is not making a wish list and not and with all due respect to our lawyer friends, not giving them a street to drive a truck through. So I think I'm good with that.
Yeah, we need to make Mr. Looney work for his.
Yeah, I think in general, what the county attorney has told the planning commission, yeah, comp plans are usually you're a little more flexible. But I think there are cases in a comp plan where will would be better, and I think that last bullet, will probably belongs there than the should. So the general notion is should, but there are cases where will might work, and I hopefully Barbara would support that. I think that. And then Jan had a comment.
Yeah, I'm really opposed to changing it to be that strong. I mean, right now their statements, their principles. When you get into you should do this or you should do that, sort of German Sie müssen, then it changes. It no longer becomes something that is the community. It's more like from on high, we're telling them you must or you will. And I like the way that it's written right now. So I'm pretty vehement about that. I feel very strongly about that should not become something that we on high are telling other people you should do this and you should do that. They're principles, just like Robert Simon doesn't say, you know, you must work and play in Reston.
I think John has probably been very creative in the way this is written. Will is used twice, and it's probably appropriate. And I don't think shall or should is even in here. I'm not sure. I couldn't find it right off, but maybe we could take a closer
Should
look at all of
definitely is
that.
not in there.
Yeah.
So what we were hoping is that because we sent this chapter out to everybody last week, is that if there was any member of the task force that has kind of read through it, John went through it from a very visually appealing standpoint, but everything he went through in the slide presentation was incorporated into this document. Really, you know, as the slide presentation went, you could kind of go down this Word document and get the actual wording and details of it. So if there was anything that you all read throughout the document that you feel like the transportation group hasn't addressed yet, but with this version, or there are sections, roads that we have not picked up or talked about, that would be really helpful for the group to go back and do the final tweaks. If there are any very specific wording changes you would like to see in the transportation chapter, if you could send those to the task force listserv. You've probably seen the transportation subgroup doing that several times in your email inboxes. But now that we have a full chapter, if there's anyone else on the task force that would like to see specific wording changes, if you could send those via the listserv, then I can pick those up into the next draft.
I think you'll find the group is very accommodating with these, unless it's a principle, then that's a little bit different. But yeah, I think Jennifer is cautioning us. We don't need to go through the various texts, but I think we could scroll through it, couldn't we, Jennifer? So again, this was the PowerPoint, and here's the descriptions of the various kinds of streets. It's important to go over these streets because this is what happens in Reston. So
could I just add one thing?
Yes.
That this is what we all went through as the transportation subgroup and has submitted, for comment tonight. So we spent a lot of time going through this to get to the stage where you have an agreed upon document, save the thing that John and Bill and I are going to talk about a little later.
So, and we use tables a lot, so that everything is on one page, or as much as we can get on one page. Bikeways, I think we went through them all in the PowerPoint.
Could I make a comment, please? This is Tammy.
No, of course it's Tammy.
Thank you. I totally agree with David Vanell and disagree with Jan. I'm so sorry because you're so sweet, but when we're talking about the comp plan, we want as much force behind it as possible. A bunch of us sit on the Reston Planning and Zoning Committee, and we are black and blue looking at crazy stuff that is terrible planning. This is our chance to have a comp plan that truly represents a vision that we share. And I don't think you can be too, I so appreciate your aesthetics and your gentility, but I'm sorry, I've seen too much bad stuff, and I really would like this to be as strong as possible. So I'm not for will, I'm for must, but I will take will. And I appreciate Barbara Byron's comments and help here, and what we need to do to make it very clear that this is our vision and we expect it to be respected. God knows there will be enough pushback. So please, let's not water it down before we start. One other comment that I would like to make regarding the transportation chapter is the group that's worked on this. I have been to every meeting, and I'm not a committee member, so I haven't talked up a lot, but I so appreciate the expertise that's been shared, and I would plead for the resulting plan to be mode neutral. In other words, we're not favoring walking, biking, or driving. We are mode neutral. We're giving information. We're saying that all modes of transportation have to be accommodated. And again, kudos to the group working on this. Thank you.
Thanks, Tammy. I like your last statement a lot. Of course, I don't like the first, but I'm looking at the paragraph before the bullets. The recommendations in this chapter envision the roadways in Reston as we could actually tweak the statement before the principles are listed. Instead of saying the recommended principles, we could say the principles are. Instead of saying the recommendations in this chapter and vision, we could say the recommendations in the listing or the wording in this chapter of the roadways in Reston as da da da. You know, you could put the strength there, but you don't have to tell people you should do this and you should do that. That's where I'm coming from.
I think that's the right approach.
Paragraph.
This plan is different than the last one. We are 7 or 8 years past the previous plan. We know a lot more now. We've had a lot more projects have come through. We know what the proffers are. We know what's pretty good and maybe not so good. And so this would help us fix those things that are not so good and do more of the things that are okay. And I think good, strong description of what you want is always the best.
And to that point, John, I'm reacting in this way based on what we've seen in planning and zoning and what you've shown us in your photograph.
Yeah.
We don't want any more no tree roads, no sidewalks, no putting up big transformer boxes in the middle of a sidewalk on a major important sidewalk. If you don't have a strong plan and language, you're going to end up with more of that. And it isn't about who's being nice.
Yeah.
Reston is a gem, and we have to treat it with that respect. And that doesn't mean you can't be firm. And I appreciate your feelings, Jan, but trust me, I've seen a lot of stuff, and you've seen the pictures. We don't want that anymore.
Yes.
Better.
So as Jennifer said, many of you, hopefully all of you have read this before. You may have comments. We do need to move on to the second part, which is on traffic and management. And then we have other items completely different after that. But if you would please send your comments to the Reston Comprehensive Plan listserv. We will all get it, and we in the Transportation and Connectivity Working Group will do our best to accommodate as much as possible all viewpoints. Okay.
Hey, John,
Yes.
it's Walter. Let's go ahead and take a few more minutes. We're going to push our agenda a little bit, but John, we've got 5
I think we
minutes.
can get through this. I think we can get through this quickly. So
Yeah,
just,
I think that we can too, but I specifically landed on this page because, as you can see, it's a really good example of how we gave a summary and then more specific information down here of what we want local streets to look like. And John Carter has done a good job of collecting pictures, but that's the next iteration of this chapter, is to add those graphics into each of the different sections. So if you all have pictures that you would like us to incorporate in the transportation chapter, you could also send those to the listserv.
and those pictures will have captions so that it's clear why the picture is there and what it is that you're supposed to get out of the picture. What is this? Okay, bikeways. I think we went through the bikeways.
Commissioner Carter?
Yes.
We had a couple hands from some of the task force that wasn't part of the working group discussions.
Fine.
Did we want to go through some of those hands that are raised?
I think so.
Okay. I see Chris Daniel had I'm going alphabetically, so I see Chris Daniel had a hand.
Thanks, Jose. I kind of went out with the alphabetical game with the last name starting with D. Yeah, I'm not a member of the working group, so I wanted a chance to, I thought that's kind of what this was giving some of the non-worker members a chance to provide our feedback, not just in comments. As someone who chairs a board that functions with guidelines and standards, I think overall, I really do like what was put together. I have to agree with Tammy. I think this is an excellent revision that's being proposed. And I have to agree with the sentiment that we should try to include, starting at the top, stronger convictions about what we would like to see, and then the language beneath that should be softer in the sense of the how. And that's how we do it in the Architecture Review Board, is we have standards that dictate to these are the broader requirements that we expect any application or anything coming through. And so in this instance, any transportation and mobility aspect to adhere to and to seek to achieve. They're usually broader and more flexible, but then we go down into the examples later. So I think that's my biggest concern in looking at this is, and from what I've heard from the fellow task force members, some of which who have much more experience in transportation and mobility, is we want to make the standard high. And so where we can do that, I say push for it. And obviously we're only one aspect of this component to go through the process. So it has to go through other filters. So other things may be stripped, but I would prefer not to self-regulate ourselves in that step there. The only other thing I would just add is when the commentary about principles and we don't want to be from up high, that's the entire point of what we're doing here, is it's a community-driven task force initiative. So we're not having someone from one chair make a decision. We are bringing a collective group of voices in. I mean, just seeing what the work group has been doing to get to where you are now, you're taking many voices and trying to get it into a collective document. So I applaud you for that, but don't hold back on the wills, I suppose, or musts if we need to include them, with standards that we expect certain things to adhere to, so we can get the things that John talked about in his pictures, so we make those not a reality anymore. That's only my only comment from a larger perspective. Thanks.
Thank you, Chris. I'm gonna go through some of the comments in the chat just for everyone to make sure. Mr. Farrell says the Reston comp plan is incorporated by reference into the PRC, so will and must are appropriate. That's back to the will and must discussion we had. Reston Bell actually commented, I see we have all members of the community. Do we more specifically name the inclusiveness of accessibility for those members that are not able-bodied or mobility challenges? That was a question, so I just want to make sure we get that. I think that is part of the principles or what we're considering as Jennifer's adding that as a comment. Mr. Farrell also asked what happened to the extension of Lawyers Road through to McLaren. And then I'm gonna circle back with some additional hands in the chat. But we have a comment from Jason strongly disagreeing that we are mode neutral. Walkability should be number one. And I think I got most of the hands. So I see that Mike Jennings has a hand, and we can swing back to other hands as well. Mike Jennings.
Yes, thank you, Jose. And I'll make sure to send an email about this to the transportation group. I really appreciate all the work they've done in the intensity and mix of uses section of the transportation, which I didn't think we were going to go over in detail. It was the demand management, so I wanted to comment on it. There are a couple of statements that I think would require some additional clarification. This would be on page 13 of the draft we received, dated April 5th. In the third paragraph, additionally on a project-by-project basis, yada, yada, yada. Increase in fire being requested beyond what would ordinarily be required. That seems like who gets to decide what is ordinarily required? Seems like it ought to have some flesh put around it. And then below in the fourth paragraph, the last sentence, the intensity of development and mix of uses to be revised if needed to reduce unacceptable impacts. Again, who decides what's unacceptable? Again, you know, one of Tammy's colleagues on the Planning and Zoning Committee, you know, I can just see us sitting there trying to decide, well, that's an unacceptable impact, or that's beyond what would ordinarily be required. So I think it would be very helpful to have those things fleshed out. Thanks.
Good.
So, and I think I have 3 more hands. Oh, I see. Maura Callahan has a hand. I know she wasn't with the working group. Maura, did you have a comment or a question?
I'm so sorry. It's not about the working group and it's not about transportation. I want to jump back really quickly. I want to ask Mark Looney, not now, but maybe in writing, you could go back to your comment about why parking garages and walls and things are not proving to be helpful in that corridor development. So if you could touch back on that, not now, but maybe in an email or at another time, I'd really be interested to know why that isn't working out.
So the short answer is it helps from a noise perspective. It's just some consider it to be unaesthetically or aesthetically displeasing. So it does its function on the noise.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not attractive to look at sometimes.
Okay, and this is a transportation question for the group. Does anybody know what the future, you know, we're talking about electric cars and we have highway noise of, let's say, it's 75 decibels. What is the future, if it's all electric cars, which it seems like it's going that direction, what's the difference in decibel level between electric cars and non-electric cars?
This is Bill Patton. Just the short answer is electric cars are very quiet, but I suspect without knowing that it's tire noise as much as anything, and the occasional crash, but we'll leave those out.
I'll find out. I was going to just know if anyone knows. My brother is an engineer, works for an auto company, and they are talking about putting some sort of noise on electric cars for people who are, you know, blind and you know, just so that there is some noise. So I'd just be curious to know from a decibel level, because then that would alleviate that corridor issue that we're talking about with Mark.
There's also the noise coming off the metro that is intermittent, but it is substantial. I do not know the decibel, but it's not only the vehicles, it's the metro noise.
That's a good point. Okay, all right, that's just a question. I'll have maybe some questions about transportation another time. Sorry to interrupt about that.
Any additional questions? I saw some hands and they went down. Oh, Bill, I saw your hand at the bottom. Sorry.
That's okay. Just going through it, there are some tweaks that we'll need to make when we finalize it. You know, just some places where words got dropped or sentences aren't clear as to what they mean. There's one place in one of the tables where there's just a mistake. Reston Station Boulevard isn't a connection between Eastern Sunset Hills Road to Western Sunset Hills Road. So there's some things like that, but I don't think they're controversial to the larger group. John,
There are probably mistakes on that. That actually is true. Reston Station is a connection from Eastern to Western, but okay. Eventually it will.
Okay, I see what you're saying from that all the way at that end to that end. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. That might not have been the best words to say that, but.
Okay. In terms of your slides, John, there are some problems with, I don't know if you're planning to put those into the final document, but you have the Soapstone overpass is actually the South Lakes overpass. The Pinecrest extension, and your picture shows it right through the middle of the woods, and the discussion we had in the committee and with the staff is they would try to do it through the parking lots, not through the woods, because that would be a pretty terrible place to put a road, particularly one that has so little impact on traffic. And then on the grid of streets around Wheelie, I really do think we should put something in that, because we can do it either based on what the owner submitted, or just based on the roads that are already internal. We can draw an approximate one there, and we can also show an extension east of Wheelie into the existing developments. And I think I sent a proposed amendment to that slide. So there's some things like that, but just weighing in on how strong we want to be in terms of the principles. I agree that we want to strengthen that. You know, I'm in agreement with Tammy and others that if all we say is these are recommended principles, recommended to whom for what, and it ends up being unenforceable.
Those are all good
points. Things like that. And there's some places where we just have repetition or drop the word bicycle that clearly nobody's going to object to fixing those, but those are in the category of tweaks. Thank you.
Commissioner Carter, I wanted to, Michelle Kimmel had a hand and I thought Mark Malcolm did. So maybe we could just do those two hands, and then I do want to give John Mooney some time to present his information.
Yeah.
Michelle?
Yeah, I'm wondering if we can't also in the principles, and then possibly also in the section on the augmented bus service, include language on equity, and specifically if we're looking at some transportation improvements to public transportation, that there's a focus on equity and a focus on ensuring that some of our lower to moderate income neighborhoods are prioritized, and you know, in some to get some of these improvements, because especially if folks in those neighborhoods are really relying on this transportation for employment. But I would like to see maybe if we could get a bullet in the principal section on equity.
It's a good
And
point.
that's why I was asking earlier when Penn was going to go to paper on the equity and public health, because I was hoping that the equity discussions would yield something for each of the chapters. Because I do have that in a note in another version, not this clean version, that we were waiting for the equity group to give us a bullet. So if you guys could put that on your list for next meeting, we'd love to have it in transportation. And I'll
Yeah,
add
I
the
think-
other one under augmented bus service too.
Okay, cool. I think one thing we had talked about in the equity and public health meeting was the idea too that, hopefully this can be part of the discussion early on as well. And so, we know we were a bit late to the game with transportation, and I say that with a laugh because I know how much work has gone into this. So, but hopefully with the other subgroups where we can, think about this throughout the process. Yep. I hope I can speak for everyone working on the subcommittee that we can work on some language to send to you guys.
Good.
Thank you, Michelle. And I think Mark Malcolm lowered his hand, but just want to make sure that if you want to make a quick comment.
I lowered it. The comment was with EV vehicles, the NHSTA had put it for the low speeds, 19 and below, basically to have it above 40 decibels or above. Anyway, with the highway speeds, there's going to be noise anyway. That was follow on to somebody else's comment. Thanks.
Thank you, Mark.
Do you want to go quickly through the rest of it, 30 seconds or less? Just so at least you can see it. I don't imagine we'll have time for too many comments, but you want to just keep scrolling down, public transit. I think we went over that pretty well.
Yeah, this is the piece that we're going to get to next, and
Yeah.
then it's
So do the
placemaking
last
after.
one, which is the placemaking, which I
Placemaking.
think we covered pretty well in the PowerPoint. So it goes a larger description of each one of these streets and what it would take to make it work better.
Yep.
So, and comments are certainly welcome on these things. I just wanted to show you what it looked like. Is that the whole thing? So it's 15.
Yep, this is just, this is
Yeah.
placemaking, and we did add, no, we didn't add it here. We, Bill Penniman, we did put something on the environment. Oh, I remember where we put it. We put it in principles. So we did connect the environment. We haven't done equity, but we did
Yeah, it was
connect
the
the
last
environment.
principle, and I think we were going to put that
Yep.
in the environmental chapter.
Right. So
But
we
these
did
chapters are
punt
going,
that over.
we're doing them separately, but they're going to have to work together in the end. So all these comments, the health and wellness chapters and environment, we're going to have to make sure the whole thing reads well together. So we'll be coming back to this, I'm sure. Okay, that's the text. I didn't mean to hurry us up, but I just wanted everybody.
Quick question, just a really quick one. The 13th, page 13, when they're talking about intensity and mix of uses, they're talking about density drives traffic, whether pedestrian, bicycle, or motor vehicle. So if we get up to 157,000 people, that's going to be controlling density is the most important tool for transportation management. And then on page 14, you talk about Reston Parkway will function to carry a large volume of motor vehicle traffic. It will also accommodate transit vehicles, cyclists, and pedestrians. And then you talk about not widening Reston Parkway. You talk about lowering the speed limit to 35. It's only 40. And it just seems, and it's also talked about as a minor arterial highway. So I find that kind of inconsistent. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, I don't see that in there, but we'll see what we can do.
Okay, thanks. At page 13 and 14.
Okay.
So Jennifer, you suggested that if the task force had additional comments to send that to you guys through the listserv?
Correct. Correct.
Okay.
Okay, are we ready to move to transportation management at this point?
Yes, you are on. Mr.
Okay,
Moody.
thank you. And Jose, I would ask, let's begin with the PowerPoint I gave you. And as
Yeah,
Jose,
let me get presenter role real quick. Give
okay.
me one moment.
As Jose's doing that, let me just comment to Michelle and others who have expressed concerns about equity. I would point out that on pages 2 and 3 of the transportation management version that Bill Penniman and I did, both the pedestrian and bicycle facilities metrics and the public transportation service metrics both state those facilities and services, quote, shall be equitably distributed in all areas of Reston. So we built the equity concern into those things because the extension of the network in all areas of Reston is a question of equity, we believe. So
If I may really fast, forgive me, but if I may, I think though that equity, I think maybe we need to consider that language a bit. Because it's not just about, is it spread out fairly, but when we're looking at areas that may need it most, is it going in the right places?
exactly.
So
We
perhaps the
talked about
language
that.
we can
We
work
talked
on.
about that
Yeah.
too. Yep. Okay. Take a look at it, Michelle, and give us your suggestions on it. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So uh, we have two versions. We have the one that Bill and I worked on, and we had actually been working on it for some time, and then were asked. Well, let me start with here. Why do we have two versions? The first is that, in fact, our subgroup, the Transportation Connectivity Working Group, had a very limited discussion of transportation management. And the reason was that we spent such time on everything before. As you can see by all of the stuff that John has just presented you, we spent an awful lot of time on that. And so at the end, we had a very limited time to discuss transportation management. So the editing was left to myself, to Bill Penniman, and Gary Maupin, and in our discussions we had as I say, no major substantive differences between the two versions. We were both trying to balance the spectrum of the group's views on things, and I thought we did a pretty good job. But the difference was between Bill and me and Gary is different views on the mostly on the appropriate level of explanation. So how much explanation should we give in this section on transportation management? Okay, next slide. So the structure of Bill's and my version is we start with the role of transportation management. That is the planning and implementing of all the system elements that John Carter has just gone through. And that leads us to consider the goals and objectives. And these are laid out in Fairfax County's 2017 Transportation Appendix to the comp plan, the policy part. But doing it in a Restonized way, to coin a term. That then leads us to try to develop appropriate metrics for all the modes so that we can know how to concretize those goals and objectives, and then to measure how they actually succeed, what the results are from those modes. And that leads us to consider transportation demand management. That is the management of all of the demands on the transportation system, whether in the TSAs or non-TSAs, whether for specific projects or network-wide. And we note, as has been mentioned before, the intimate relationship between transportation demand management and the comp plan's types and densities of uses. And finally, but this is really just a short thing because of completeness, it was found in the current, very briefly in the current version of the comprehensive plan, we mention funding to do all this. And here there's a simple reference to the funding docs and oversight boards that Fairfax County has developed. So that's the structure of how Bill and I put this together. Next slide, please. So this is an unfortunately busy slide, but basically our version addresses these key issues that we see in Reston's transportation management. First of all, it takes the county's goal of reducing SOV reliance and promoting other modes of transportation, but, and this is the fruit of much discussion in our group about both not trying to coerce anyone, but rather to attract people to use different modes, but not to coerce them. It has to do with sensitivity to the needs and concerns of Reston residents, of workers, and businesses. So under that main point, transit-oriented development in the TSAs with appropriate planning and TDM and facilities is Reston's primary measure to implement the county's goal. So the very design of the TSAs are designed around heavy lifting modes like metro train and bus service. So that pulls much of the weight. County goals are also met by improving safe pedestrian, biking, and transit opportunities throughout Reston and making them attractive, making them efficient and attractive and fairly distributed throughout the community. And finally, we try to preserve the range of residents' mobility choices using, including use of SOVs, which are particularly important for traditional residential areas, which don't have buses running through its innards, and calls for impact analysis and mitigation, including developer consultation with nearby neighborhoods. So there will be redevelopment in the neighborhoods, and when that is done, it needs to be done in consultation with the neighbors, so that we can preserve those neighborhoods from excessive congestion. And then finally, metrics and mitigation measures. So we had a lot of discussion about whether or not to keep vehicular LOS, motor vehicle LOS. As you may know, the current plan says the goal is to maintain the level in the TSAs at least an LOS of E, which is a delay of somewhere between 55 and 80 seconds to go through a intersection, and then with a range of traffic mitigation options for developers to achieve those targets. And our version also clarifies, because it's only mentioned very briefly and in passing, the appropriate use of motor vehicle LOSs in non-TSA areas. Now why have, everybody knows that motor vehicular LOS is a very limited measure, a metric focused on autos only, but it's important because we all complain about the congestion on Reston Boulevard at certain times, and so we need to, pardon me, Reston Parkway is what I meant. So we need to have this tool in our toolbox to force developers to avoid creating undue congestion. But we also developed, the next bullet, metrics for pedestrians, bike, and transit. They're in our version, they're drifted primarily in qualitative terms because of the difficulty of quantifying them. Burton is going to give a brief presentation on how we might go about quantifying them more. But we think our qualitative terms are actually quite good. You can measure quality. It is not unmeasurable, but it's not as quantifiable. And then mitigation measures include actions by developers and counties and ongoing monitoring and periodic rebalancing of the mix of the various modes. And then finally, some particular things where we seek Fairfax County staff confirmation and clarification on are elements such as there's a section on pages 1 to 2 in our draft, which talks about how to go about resolving motor vehicular LOSE non-attainment in the TSAs. At least I find it very confusing how that works. And also we need to be sure that the effectiveness of TDM in achieving the county's trip reduction goals really is functioning. We had a big discussion about TSA parking ratios. Some some preferred reducing parking as a way of forcing people out of their cars. Other people said that's horrible for businesses and for residents in that area, and it causes spillover for buildings constructed with low parking ratios, spillover from those buildings into the neighborhoods. And I'll say a little bit more about that. And then finally, the county has assumed a 7.5% technology-based roadway efficiency. We need to carefully scrutinize that to see if it's realistic and whether it really comes to pass. There are many, we could go into that in great detail, can't do it now. Let me give you an example of the parking ratio to illustrate that second last bullet there. So our plan, our current plan says that we, in the TSAs, we have only a maximum limit on and only on office space. So I won't go into the details, but it has only that. However, because of a county zoning ordinance amendment in 2018, now we also have a minimum requirement. So we need to deal with that. Bill and I feel we need to address these things in the transportation manager version. Otherwise, people don't know where to find this information. Those two facts that I told you about, the maximum and the minimum, are not found in the same place in any county document I've seen. They're in separate documents, they're unrelated, and we believe issues like that should be discussed in the transportation management portion. Okay, next slide. And now it's time for Gary to give his less detailed version, which he's whittled down to 1 page. Gary?
Just 1 second, I guess we need to get mine called up. Hope this is the one. Can you go down? Oh, this is not the one. No, there's a later version that John sent out, Jose, that I know Jennifer has. So I hope, John, you sent out the.
Jose, I have it if you want to pass it back to me. If not, unless you have it up already.
John just referred to the 1-pager there that I assume Jennifer's calling up. So that's still not it, Jennifer.
That's the one. Sorry, this is Jose. This is the one that I saw on the sent today. May have been the wrong one, but I'll pass the presenter role to Jennifer.
Jennifer, you have the 1-pager, right?
Yep, right here.
Okay. So going back to, everybody could hear me, correct?
Yes.
So going back to what John talked about, this is something that TDM is something that we didn't get to talk about in finally getting the document to everyone on the task force as a whole. It was just, you know, the last thing that was kind of left and not agreed upon before going to you. And Bill and John got me something, oh, I don't know, last Thursday. And I just had a little different view of how to accomplish these things. When I looked at their version, it kind of looked unbalanced to me in the sense of, you know, being very, very negative, which is kind of a tendency of TDM, of course, against cars and striking a different tone against the balance that we talked about in the group, even though they worked hard to make it better from what was done in the previous plan that had a lot of criticism in our group. So they worked hard to do that. And I certainly appreciated that, and I'm sure everybody else does. But I just think that I'd always looked at doing documents like this as succinctly as possible, in the sense that that's allows people to understand it better, and it makes it a document that kind of sings better to everybody. So I was trying to cut it down generally from ground zero in any document like this. And then I thought, if we do some of the things I'm talking about, we're going to get to the same kinds of things that John and Bill wanted, except do it in a slightly different way, shorter, simply as that, nothing more than that. And then more easily refer back to the county documents, which, you know, kind of hold sway on this. The county documents can change. The plan won't at the same time. We want to follow the county documents. And then as I was thinking about this, as I was going through it, maybe last Thursday, I went and looked at other plans. So I took a couple of the national award-winning plans from, you know, the national award as best comp plans in the country. And I took two of those and I went through and searched, both going through it and the search criteria that you have for PDF. And one of them did not have anything on transportation management, transportation demand management. And the other one had about a quarter of what I have on this one page. They had less than 100 words. They considered it an important tool to use. But when I saw that, and those weren't referring back to other documents because they're, you know, cities and counties. And I found a third that I just happened to run into that popped up as a recent document that all of these, they're beautiful. So tons of pictures and tons of drawings, and they look spectacular. Going back to what John Carter did on the run through here, that's going to help us on the plan as a whole. But at any rate, that third one, recent place about twice the size of this in an adjoining state with the Wegmans, they didn't have anything on TDM at all. So then I also had a local Virginia one, and that had, you know, a little more than half of this. So kind of what I did here is try to just get to the same point. When you go down to the recommendations, I'm referring to, well, let me go back just a second. These are mostly Bill and John's words. The great majority of this is their words, just cut down significantly. And the little of it is from another comp plan, like the summary here, and a little bit of the lead in. But basically, these are just be modifying a few words, and I think this helps us get to the look of a more balanced plan, easier to understand, changeable relating to the county documents as they change, and still gets almost everything that Bill and John had. I will say there are a couple of differences. If you'll notice the end of what John talked about, he had funding at the bottom there, and the only difference is I just said that should be, in a summary to this chapter or another place in the chapter, not in the transportation demand management section. So there's zero disagreement there. There's a point that I thought that the transportation people would be on here tonight because we're discussing it, and Mr. Sadney would be on, but John has a short paragraph in his document about the need for a study between transportation, between the TSAs and the non-TSA areas. And I just took that little less than a paragraph out on the assumption that that will be, it's not the best place to put it in here, but that should be assured to us by the transportation department, and doesn't need to be in a comp plan. And then there's a little difference on pass-through traffic in Reston and the tools that are being used to reduce pass-through transportation, including cutting some of the main roads through various techniques that when we're expanding our population and we have all the new businesses being built here and so forth and so on, we don't want to go backwards in roads in terms of their use. We don't want to restrict that except for signage and those kind of things. So a difference in tone of strategy on that. But other than that, there's no difference in what we're getting to here. And it does reflect a better balance, but still obviously favors making sure we have the appropriate controls in and we're supporting pedestrians and bicyclists by referring to the county documents. So I think that's a general view of why I came to the conclusion I did of shortening this up and accomplishing kind of the same thing and making it more changeable for the future.
So we sent out to the task force this one-page document, and then we also sent out this one where it says at the top for a final draft. So it's 6 pages versus 1 page. And I think what would be helpful is if we could get some feedback from the non-transportation subgroup members, if there is a recommendation of how detailed you all think that we should be on this topic in the chapter.
Thank you, Jennifer. I was trying to say the same thing with my microphone off. So,
Jennifer, if I could just add one thing, just as for people when they're reading it, to take a look. Yes, John's and my version is longer, it is more detailed, but in part, given the complexity of our situation in Reston and given what was in the last plan, it seemed to make sense to do that. The ideas on what developers, when they come in with proposals, what are the checklists of things they need to, are they violating the MVLOS level that's been established? And if so, how are they going to mitigate to get it under it? And it says in item 5 that if they can't mitigate to get it under, then they're either going to have to provide funding for infrastructure improvements or potentially have a reduction in project density. So spelling that out, it seemed to us, would make sense. The reference to LOS in the non-TSA areas didn't say LOS level 5, level E. It said just don't make it any significantly worse than what the people have now. So it's very protective, but at least it requires that that be addressed, and the developer have to come up with remedies if there are potential problems. There are several other things along those lines. TDM, this includes the county's requirements that it is required in Reston and elsewhere for what the TDM levels are, which is important if you want to enforce them. That's why we wanted to put it in. And you know, it's one of the tools we have, but it's a significant tool, and that's what's spelled out here. So I think, can it be shorter? Sure, we could make it shorter. We can make it shorter and still leave in the bulk of the substance. But if you, in my own view, is if you reduce it to one page, you are giving up something that you may be able to use as a tool in the context of a P&Z meeting, or the staff uses a tool while it's working with the developer to make sure that mitigation measures are implemented. But that was our thinking, that's all.
Thank you, Bill.
Let me just add a little something to what I was saying there. Is the other documents that have nothing or very limited items on TDM in them are in areas that have far more development to even go than we do. In our case, if you go to the TSAs, there's very little left that's not already approved. So we don't have quite the same situation, and yet we have a lot more than others do in this area. And I just think this sings better with the rest of the plan document. That's my last 2 cents.
Thank you, Gary.
And
So
Bill and John and I are buddies on this. We're trying to get the same thing. It's a question of what's the best way to go here.
Gary and John, I see we have a couple hands up. Did we want to get some of their comments real quickly?
Sure. I want to make sure we leave time for Burton to do his thing. But let me just say this. What we want are, we would really like you to read both documents, give us your comments, especially your comment on what level of explanation you think is appropriate. And then the plan is we will convene another meeting, a last final meeting of our Transportation Connectivity Working Group to work this out and to bring you something for inclusion in the final version that we plan for you all to be able to vote on April 26th. Okay, thank you.
So very quickly, Jan, David, and Tammy, and then I think we can go to Burton, right, John?
Yes.
Okay, I would like to comment on the development proposals that should commit to reducing vehicle trips during peak travel times. The peak travel times, I don't see how they can go away if you're talking about businesses who expect their employees to be there on time. A lot of employees may live in South Reston where they have to travel by car. They cannot travel by metro because metro doesn't go that direction. A lot of them may be living north. So to reduce vehicle trips during travel times, peak travel times, I'm not sure how you would do that, if that's possible or realistic. That's my only comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Jan.
David Vanel?
Yeah, let me just offer this comment. Ordinarily, I would say that if somebody is writing something, the shorter and more direct is the best policy. But this is an example of why that's not always true. It seems to me that we are writing here an instruction manual for the county and also for developers. And if we are not specific about what we want, if we're not explanatory enough in the instruction manual, we're not serving ourselves. We're certainly not serving Reston, and it's we're gonna pay for this in the future if we don't have adequate information and instruction in this type of document. It's sort of like who is it? Samuel Clemens, the quote from Samuel Clemens about, "I didn't have time to write you a short note, so I wrote you a long one." In this case, it has to be detailed.
Thank you, David. Other comments? Okay. Burton?
Yes, wait. Whoa,
Oh, I'm
whoa, whoa.
sorry. Okay.
Tammy here.
Oh, Tammy, I'm sorry.
A couple of observations. I have been reading everything I can get my hands on about projections of what future work patterns are going to be given COVID and the high disruption of our autonomy given the last presidential 4 years. And there is no, yeah, I'm trying to phrase that well, so sorry about that. There is no consensus. We are, you know, whether you're reading from a person who's trying to sell property, you get one view, an employer gives you 6 views, depending on which employer it is. The other point, so the point of that is we in Reston do not know where we're going. This is a 5-year plan. It is not the end all be all end plan of the universe, Reston. The other point I want to make is we have no clue if Metro is going to work the way it is supposed to work. To date, we have 0 examples of Metro functioning well. And every time I get into another meeting on Metro, more flaws pop up. So I don't want to damn the thing. It sort of has damned itself. But I think we need to be exceedingly careful that we're not creating a vehicle for, and this is sort of counterintuitive, but for developers to avoid the $50,000 to $60,000 per parking lot, per parking space cost that it costs to provide parking. If Metro fails, we have designed a TSA that will have no T. So I think we need to be exceedingly cautious about eliminating parking requirements right now. In 5 years, we will have a clue. So for that reason, I hate to be too, it's opposite of what I said about the principles. I hate to be too dictatorial about TDM and give developers a get out of jail free card in not providing parking spaces when we have seen with Harrison what happens when they don't provide enough for their tenants and there's overflow into the neighborhood. We have seen what happens when you know, we're getting this pushback on cars. We are hoping to have a better bus system so that people can get out of their cars. That's why I keep harping on this mode neutral thing. We may need cars. It isn't a you know, a spoiled, you know, third world thing. We are sitting in the middle of a hilly environment where people are coming from God knows where all over the place to get into the core of Reston to work. and get out again, we hope to have a robust retail and restaurant business so that we have a livable place. We don't know yet what is going to work on the T of the transit. So for that reason, I would prefer to have shorter, better now, but keep that wonderful work that has been done by John Mooney and Bill Penniman. Keep that, because we may need to have it later, but I just don't think we're there yet. Thank you.
Good. If I could just make one comment, or maybe two. One thing we want to be careful of, in a sense, I'm partially agreeing with Tammy, is we don't want bad development that overparks either, because that'll harm us. The other thing I'd say is, and I think this was in response to a question you asked at the last P&Z meeting, as I recall, Boston Properties said that at Town Center, their experience is they need 1.21 parking spaces per dwelling unit. And that's based on experience that predated Metro. And, it's a well-designed development with lots of things you can do there. And if that's what we're building in the TSAs, then hopefully they won't need any more than that there either.
I think
I'd love to see a 0.2 car.
Because Bill had to added that, I will say that is not the current experience in the buildings here today by any means. Just a comment at the end there.
Did we want to
And I
get
do,
to?
and I do agree with Tammy that we don't know the future. There's a lot of studies that say there'll be more reliance on cars, more purchase of cars, et cetera, et cetera. So, I think we go back to John Looney's point, is everybody turn in their comments and we can go from there.
And the point that the last gateway project that we heard, Mark Looney tell us that he's having the same amount of parking. He's just changing it from above ground to underground and digging deeper. So I think, if Boston Properties is smart enough to get that, we got to be careful with this until Metro is a proven thing. Then we're in the worst possible time to be doing this, because we have no legitimate data on what the future is going to bring to us. So I think we have to be careful of that. Thank you.
So since my name was invoked, I'll jump in.
Mark, go ahead, Mark, and then we need to move on.
Yeah. The reality is that this has been and will continue to be a moving target. I mean, phase one Metro has been open for whatever it is, 7 years at this point. You're going to have phase two opening in 2022. And the reality is, until you get stabilization of all of this, it's a bit of a moving target. And even with that, what you start with is not what you're going to end with. And the District of Columbia, Arlington County, what Arlington was parking their Metro sites at in the 1980s is not what they're parking them at today. And so it's going to be a moving target on all of these things. And I think to Bill Penniman's point, you don't want to over park it right now. And this is a 20 or 30-year plan. And it's the zoning ordinance that dictates the number of parking spaces. Tyson's has caps on the amount of parking that can be provided. So far, we have policies in Reston that say, we're going to establish sort of a maximum number of parking spaces, but it's an evolving thing and will continue to be evolving thing until you reach stabilization after the Metro opens. And so I don't know that any one of us or any particular development, whether it's a single project or 3 or 4 projects combined, are going to figure out what the optimum number of parking spaces is across all of the TSAs, because every TSA is going to behave differently. Every project is going to behave differently based on the mix of uses and its proximity to the metro. And so in my mind, the idea is you want to remain flexible to be able to make adjustments as we go, because most of these projects are multi-phase projects. And what you do in the first phase in 2019 or 2020 is not what you're going to do in 2030 or 2032 when you build the final building. So it's just, there's no panacea on any of this. That's my point.
Thank you, Mark. And again, please read, please send your written comments, and come join us when we meet as the Transportation Subcommittee. Okay? Thank you. Now I would like, having said that we need better metrics for bikes and pedestrians, I want to hand it over to Burton. Could we go back to my slides, Jose, and Burton will lead us very briefly through that. I will remind you all that I sent out today a one-pager that Burton distilled from some good Federal Highway Administration books on how to design metrics for pedestrians and bikes. That's a very helpful one-pager. So if we can, Jose, go back to the PowerPoint that I had.
And then, John, after that, this will be the last item. We're going to push the rest of our agenda off.
Yes, okay.
I'll just start talking while Jose is pulling up those slides. This is Burton. So about a week ago, Mr. Mooney asked me to review 2 US DOT guidebooks relating to metrics that are relevant to walking and biking, and distill some observations to present to you. And that's what I'm trying to do here. I do have a greater appreciation for real transportation planners after struggling with this for a week. And I also do like the qualitative language that Mr. Moody and Mr. Penniman drafted and just presented. So why metrics? A major reason to establish walking and biking metrics is normally to develop walk-bike plans. But there are already walk-bike plans for Reston, developed from much community effort. And I'm referring to the Reston on Foot and Bicycle documents and the Fairfax Countywide Bike Plan. So in Reston, walk-bike metrics may be most helpful to prioritize among multiple potential projects and to evaluate situations where level of service to one mode of transportation is in conflict with level of service to other modes. Situations of conflict related to existing infrastructure could be considered. Potential conflict resulting from additional development projects should definitely be considered. There's an intent expressed in the existing comp plan to serve all modes of transportation well. It also says, and I quote, "It is the intent of these recommendations to maximize the future use of transit, bicycling, and walking in the TSAs and Reston in the future." That's on page 25. Personally, I doubt that we can be mode neutral and at the same time maximize biking and walking. However, there are no specific metrics related to walking and biking that are mentioned in the current plan or in the draft chapter on transportation so far. In my view, incorporating metrics applicable to walking and bicycling issues into the comp plan would provide objective measurements for staff developer reference and increases the likelihood of the comp plan achieving the community's will. The 2 Federal Highway Administration guidebooks offer metrics relevant to walking and biking. One is a guidebook for developing pedestrian and bicycle performance measures, published in 2016. The other is a guidebook for measuring multimodal network connectivity, published in 2018. The 2018 guidebook built on the 2016 guidebook. There could also be other references that would apply to this subject matter. I don't know. I'm not a transportation planner. The guidebooks cite multiple examples of how cities have developed and applied metrics on their own, independently of federal guidance. The quote from the 2016 guidebook: "Automobile level of service and volume to capacity ratios are frequently used as standards. However, relying only on these standards often results in a degradation in pedestrian or bicycle performance. Implementing standards related to pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure can aid in the development of projects that support these travel modes. No duh, right? In my opinion, walking and bicycling metrics for the Reston Master Plan purposes should be selected based on their relevance to Reston's goals, relevance to Reston's characteristics, complementarity to other metrics. What I mean by that is there's little point in having metrics that are basically redundant and re-expressing the same idea that another metric is already capturing, and data availability or the practicality of collecting the data. The 2016 guidebook presented a matrix illustrating how 30 different metrics related to 7 community goals. And those goals are basically goals that we share. It's connectivity, economic activity, meaning just the functioning of the economy, environment, equity, livability, health, and safety. I don't think anyone would argue that those are all good goals. And the goals are what is important. The metrics are to support the goals. I want to let you know that the FCDOT staff is already aware of several of these metrics and has already been attempting to capture them as part of the active Fairfax initiative. So there's no one here from FCDOT tonight that I noticed, but they do have people who are expert in what the county is doing on this. And I wanted to highlight 5 metrics that came from the 30 that were listed in the 2016 guidebook. 2 of them are mode neutral metrics, and that is average trip length, which can be measured either in distance or time, and modal split. Trip length data can inform what portions of current trips or future trips could be potentially converted to biking or walking trips. Modal split, meaning what share of transportation is associated with different modes, can be used for benchmarking and for goal setting. 3 others, a connectivity or a connectivity index, access to community destinations, and level of service are the 3 other metrics that I picked out as for potential consideration in the comp plan. And in the walk bike context, level of service assesses the speed, convenience, comfort, and security of transportation facilities. All of these metrics are quantifiable. It's a question of whether there is the will to gather the data. I thought that connectivity was the metric that was perhaps the most difficult for somebody to understand who hasn't just spent the last week reading 170 pages of guidebooks over and over again. So just to talk through how that would be applied, connectivity, that would be when there are gaps identified in the network, the priority gap to fill would be the one that would improve connectivity levels the most, all other things being equal. For instance, this metric could be used as an argument for adding a walk-bike crossing of Reston Parkway from Reston Heights, whether that's at grade or not. The southward bend of Sunrise Valley Drive and the presence of the major biking and walking barriers of Reston Parkway and the toll road results in low connectivity between important destinations north and south of the toll road. In application, this potential crossing would be compared to other projects based on factors including at least the degree of increased connectivity or route directness that was offered, and the volume of demand for travel between destinations served by the projects. Adding a crossing that I'm talking about, just as an example of Reston Parkway from Reston Heights, would cut the trip distance between Reston Heights and the town center from 1.6 to 0.8 miles, so cut the distance by half, and would also remove the procedure that you have to go through now as a pedestrian or bicyclist who wants to stay in the crosswalks. You want to cross from the east side or the west side of Reston Parkway to the other. You got to cross 3 times, so you got to wait for 3 light cycles. And it would cut the trip distance from Reston Heights to the RTC Metro from 1.2 to less than 0.5 miles, and cut the trip distance from Reston Heights to Plaza America from 1.6 to 1 mile. That's all I have, pending your questions.
Gordon, thank you. questions for Burton or comments?
Add my thanks.
See a question from Jan real quick. Where is
Yeah.
Reston Heights? Reston Heights is, yeah, Tammy's got it, the Popeyes area. It's where the Sheraton and the Weston are. It's at the southeast corner of the intersection of the Toll Road and Reston Parkway.
John Mooney, let me just ask you a question. So is it the intent or is the idea to incorporate this at the final transportation subgroup meeting? Is that right?
So what we will do as the transportation connectivity working group, we will hammer out together, taking all these ideas and by hook or crook come up with one text, which will be integrated into the text that John Carter went through this evening.
Okay, that's great. Burton, thank you. Thank you for putting all the time into this. And I do understand if it's not, well, yeah, I think the level of specificity that you've laid out here is extremely helpful. And, I just encourage you and the transportation connectivity subgroup to take your best shot at what kind of metrics might be most appropriate. Any other comments, questions? All right, we ran 5 minutes over our extended time, but that's okay. Got through a lot this evening. We didn't get to parks and open space or the other discussion on the agenda, but we'll push those into the next. Thank you, everybody, for working through this. The engagement level is fantastic. This is moving forward, and we are making progress. Appreciate everybody's not only diligence but also patience as we move through this.
Walter,
Tammy?
yes. The next meeting, you have the school presentation. So
Yes.
can we please plan a little better on our time so we don't have people thinking they're going to present and then not be able to?
Well, we didn't have anybody presenting that didn't present tonight. It was me and Jose. So.
Oh, well, you're important. You're talking about having all these other things next time, but we do have that school presentation as well, right?
Yeah, we're going to start with that. So we won't miss that. But thank you, Tammy. Good point. Yeah, yeah. Okay. Other thoughts before we wrap up?
Just
okay.
Thanks to John and to everyone else, Bill Penniman and Gary, for what they came up with. They did a lot of work and just fantastic work on this.
I totally agree, Jan. Thank you for saying that. And yeah, a lot of good work going on here, and let's keep the momentum going and everybody keep the good work going. So thank you all, and everyone get some rest tonight and get some food if you haven't already, please.
Good night.
All right.
Good.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, Walter.